Russ laughed when he said it. Laughed like it was an inside joke I wasn't supposed to hear. Mom's using you for the card, not the company. The line hit like cold water down the spine. But I didn't flinch. I didn't even turn my head. Just stood there, coffee mug in hand, pretending I didn't hear him. Pretending that the weight of his words wasn't already digging into the soft tissue beneath my ribs. Russ was 17. Tall, wiry, arrogant. The kind of boy who never learned to respect anyone he couldn't manipulate. And he had Julia's smile, the one that twisted into something cruel when it wanted to. I never expected warmth from him, but I did expect a minimum level of decency. That morning, even that was gone. He said it in front of Casey, his younger sister, who snorted into her phone without looking up. She didn't need to speak. Her silence had always been enough to cut through me. I rinsed my cup in the sink and left the room. That afternoon, I used the same card Russ thought was my leash to buy a first-class ticket to San Diego. Departure, Sunday. No return. I didn't pack right away. I waited through another Friday night dinner where Julia stared at her plate while the kids scrolled through their phones and I paid for takeout they didn't even thank me for. Waited through a Saturday morning where Russ asked if I could spot him a few hundred for college stuff, and I said sure, knowing I wouldn't, knowing I was already gone. When Sunday came, I printed every canceled check, every online payment confirmation, every email trail that showed how deeply I'd embedded myself into their lives, into their survival. And when the house was quiet, Julia still asleep, the kids upstairs, I placed the stack on the kitchen island, neatly clipped with a single note on top. I'm not a service company. Good luck. They called it petty. I call it fairness. My name is Alex. I'm 46 years old. For nearly 6 years, I lived with Julia in a weathered ranch-style house in Austin, Texas. Her son, Russ, and daughter, Casey, lived with us full-time. Their father had checked out years before I showed up. No alimony, no shared custody, no birthday visits. Just a man-shaped hole in their story, one they filled with resentment and fantasy. I never tried to replace him. That was my first mistake. When Julia and I first got serious, I told myself I'd take things slow with the kids, respect their space, let them come to me. I thought that was the noble thing to do, wait for their trust instead of forcing it. I thought if I provided stability, consistency, kindness, they'd see me. Instead, they saw opportunity. Russ wanted sneakers, concert tickets, car insurance. Casey needed a new phone, braces, summer camp. Julia didn't ask me outright to cover it all. She just sighed when the bills came in and let the silence do her begging. I stepped up. Like a man should, I thought. I didn't come from money, but I worked hard. I built a small logistics firm from scratch in my early 30s. Long hours, lean years. But it paid off. By the time I met Julia, I could afford to be generous. And I paid for everything. Not just the big things. Not just tuition and medical bills and utilities. The little things too. Lunches, Uber rides, last-minute school projects. I kept the fridge full, the Wi-Fi running, the roof repaired. I even added them to my health insurance. No one asked me to. No one thanked me either. Julia said it wasn't about gratitude. They're kids, she told me. They don't know how good they have it. She'd lean her head on my shoulder after the lights were off and say, "You're a good man, Alex. You're helping them more than their father ever did." But those words never made it to daylight. When Russ slammed his bedroom door in my face because I asked him to take out the trash, Julia just said, "He's going through a lot." When Casey rolled her eyes and called me Uncle ATM, under her breath, Julia pretended she didn't hear. First, I tried to excuse it. Teenagers, right? Hormones, attitude, testing boundaries. They'd come around. That's what I told myself. Every Sunday morning when I cooked breakfast while they slept in, every night I worked late to cover another round of bills, I told myself this was a phase. But it wasn't a phase. It was a culture. One I had funded with my silence. Julia's silence hurt more than theirs. She knew what I gave. She saw it on the bank statements, the emails, the tax forms. She knew what I did to keep that house warm and safe and fed. And still, when the kids disrespected me, She flinched away from confrontation. I remember one night late last year. I had just gotten home from a business trip, 3 days in Houston, back-to-back meetings. I was exhausted. Walked in through the garage, suitcase in hand, tie half undone. Casey was in the kitchen with her laptop. She looked upside and said, "Didn't think you'd be back so soon." That was it. No, hi. No, how was your trip? No acknowledgement at all. Just a sigh like I'd disrupted the atmosphere. I looked to Julia, who was folding laundry on the couch. She glanced up, smiled faintly, and said, "You made good time." I stood there, still holding my bag, the weight of the week pressing into my spine, and realized this wasn't a family. This was a transaction, and I was the only one paying. But the moment that truly broke the spell was smaller. One night, I found Russ in the living room, talking on speakerphone. He didn't hear me come in. He was laughing with a friend, talking about the upcoming family vacation I was planning. One I hadn't told them I was paying for yet. I heard him say, clear as a bell, "Yeah, it's all on the stepdude. He thinks this trip is gonna bring us closer or something. Mom says just keep him happy until we go. After that, who knows?" I stood in the hallway, my heart beating slow and hard. I listened to him laugh and something inside me cracked. Not loud, not messy, just final. I didn't confront him. I didn't shout or throw anything. I didn't tell Julia what I heard. Instead, I went upstairs, sat at my desk, and looked through 6 years of financial records. Over $180,000. That's what I'd spent on this family since moving in. Rent, groceries, school, insurance, car repairs, home renovations, vacations, holidays, birthday parties. All of it. All tracked. All paid. All mine. I stared at the total and felt nothing. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Just clarity. They thought I was a wallet. I had been one. But that ends when the balance does. I bought the ticket. One-way, first class. San Diego. I didn't know what I'd do there. Didn't care. I just knew I needed to be somewhere that wasn't here. Somewhere where I wasn't the punchline to a teenager's joke or the background character in Julia's carefully curated life. I made no dramatic exit. No grand speeches. I simply stopped being what they needed and started being what I needed. When I left, I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently behind me, let it whisper the ending they never saw coming. They called it petty. I call it proof that even the quiet ones eventually speak. And when they do, they never repeat themselves. When I met Julia, she was already tired. Not the kind of tired that fades with a night's sleep, but the kind that sinks into the bones and settles there. Her life had worn her down in small, precise ways. A decade of single motherhood, a mortgage always 2 steps ahead of her paycheck, and an ex-husband whose only consistent trait was his absence. We met at a charity auction. She was volunteering. I was attending out of obligation. I don't remember what I bid on. Some signed memorabilia, maybe, but I remember the way she laughed when I offered to carry a box of items she couldn't quite lift. That laugh was real. Not performative, not measured. Caught me off guard. We had coffee 2 days later. Dinner a week after that. By the end of the month, we were spending weekends together, long walks and quiet nights, and I told myself this was the start of something solid, something earned. Julia had 2 children. Russ was 13. Casey had just turned 11. They were wary of me from the beginning. Not hostile, not yet, but cautious. Protective of their routines, their rhythms, their version of family. I understood. I didn't push. I showed up when invited. I stayed quiet when the ex-husband's name came up. I tried to earn a place by showing restraint. Julia was living in a creaking house on the south side of Austin. The kind of place that looked charming in spring sunlight but collapsed under the weight of a rainy November. Peeling paint, mold in the bathroom, a heating system that coughed instead of breathing. She was working nights at a local clinic and picking up weekend shifts to cover the rest. I started helping quietly, subtly. A new microwave, a repaired garage door. I'd bring groceries when I visited. Once, when her car broke down, I paid for the repairs before she could open her wallet. She tried to protest, but it was the kind of protest that collapsed at the first gust of real generosity. She let me pay. That was the first time. 2 years in, I moved in. The house became my project. Not just in the handyman sense, though I did plenty of that, but as a space to build something better. I wanted to give them a real home, not a stopgap between paychecks. A home. Something grounded. I replaced the boiler, resealed the roof, tore up the water-damaged carpet, and laid hardwood with my own hands. I worked nights, weekends, sweating in silence while the kids sat in the next room watching TV, pretending not to see me. At first, I thought they were just adjusting. I gave them space, gave them time. I never laid down rules or demanded respect. I thought that if I gave enough, eventually they'd open the door themselves. Instead, they learned to walk through me. Russ started calling me man instead of Alex, then just him. "He wants the trash taken out," he'd say, not even looking my way. Casey followed suit in her own passive way. She was sharper, more subtle, the kind of girl who weaponized politeness like a scalpel. "Thanks," she'd say through clenched teeth whenever I bought her something. "Thanks, Alex." With just enough venom on my name to make sure I knew I was not family, not father, just tolerated. I tried to stay above it. Julia asked me to. "Don't escalate things," she'd whisper after dinner when Russ pushed past me in the hallway. "He's just going through something." But she never told him to stop, never corrected him. She played the middle, thinking that by standing between us, she was keeping the peace. But really, she was feeding the silence. I made suggestions once, simple things. A chore wheel, quiet hours after 10, basic respect. Julia smiled tightly. "They're teenagers, Alex. Don't take it so personally." But it was personal. Every eye roll, every backhanded comment, every ignored hello. It chipped at something inside me. I was a ghost with a credit card, present but not counted. Then came the names. I overheard Casey one night on the phone with her friend. I had just come in from fixing the fence. She didn't know I was in the hallway. "He's like an ATM with legs," she laughed. "Uncle ATM. He just pays for stuff and disappears." I stood there, hands still dirty with sawdust, and felt something twist inside me. Not rage. Not yet. Just distance. A growing gap between the man I thought I was in their lives and the man they actually saw. That same week, I paid off Julia's remaining credit card debt, $28,000, quietly, anonymously through a balance transfer. She found out when her statement showed zero and the bank confirmed the payment came from my account. She cried that night, kissed me hard, told me I was saving them. I wish I'd asked then, saving them from what? From her mistakes? From their father's absence? Or from the truth that they had never really considered me family? Russ got his license 6 months later. I paid for the classes, bought the car. A used Toyota Corolla, clean, reliable. Julia called it a miracle. Russ called it decent. "No thank you. No nod. Just, cool. Can I take it out tonight?" Julia beamed at him like he'd just won the lottery. I stood in the driveway, keys still in my hand, wondering when gratitude had become optional. It didn't stop there. College applications rolled in. Casey wanted to tour campuses out of state. Julia sighed, said it would be tight this year. I said I'd cover it. Flights, hotels, rental cars, all on me. Julia kissed my cheek. The kids barely made eye contact. Every step of the way, I bled money into their lives. And in return, they gave me silence, sarcasm, and the occasional eye roll if I dared ask for help around the house. But I kept going, kept giving, because I thought it was a matter of time. That consistency would win. That if I stood firm, stayed kind, remained present, they'd change. What I didn't understand then is this: you can't build trust on top of contempt. No matter how much you give. The shift came slowly. Julia started using phrases like, "My kids need space," and "You're not their father, Alex." She said it gently, like a reminder, like I had crossed some invisible boundary by asking Casey to clean up the kitchen after her friends trashed it. "You're not their father." That was the line. The one she repeated every time I asked for the smallest scrap of cooperation. I began to hear it even when she didn't say it. Every time she chose silence over support. Every time she walked out of the room when Russ rolled his eyes at me. Every time she asked me to be the bigger person. You're not their father. Fine. But then who was I? Because I was the one who paid. The one who stayed. The one who put in the hours, the effort, the heart. Their father was a name on an old birth certificate. A ghost. A memory shaped by absence. And yet somehow he was never questioned. Never resented. Only me. I remember a day, 2 years ago, when Casey came home from school in tears. She had gotten into a fight with a friend. I sat with her on the porch, listening. I didn't try to fix it, just listened. She leaned against my shoulder. For 5 minutes I thought maybe this is it. Maybe she sees me. But the next morning, she told Julia I was weird for sitting so close. And Julia told me to give her space. I gave them space. I gave them everything. And they gave me less than nothing. I started to notice things I had ignored before. How Russ used my Netflix account but changed the name to Not Dad. How Casey took down a picture Julia had framed of the 4 of us on vacation. Said it made her uncomfortable. How Julia would correct me gently when I told people we were a family. Blended, she'd say. Always blended. Never just family. I was a placeholder. A quiet man funding someone else's life script. Still, I stayed. Not because I was weak, but because I believed in endurance. I believed that effort would eventually be seen. That love, even unreciprocated, could transform people. I know better now. I was building a bridge to people who were dismantling it plank by plank behind me. And eventually I ran out of wood. There is a moment in every slow death where silence stops being passive. It becomes weaponized. I came home on a Thursday evening, suitcase in hand, throat raw from 3 days of boardroom debates. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. The house smelled like frozen pizza and body spray. I set the bag down by the door, loosened my tie, and listened. Laughter from the kitchen. Not the warm kind. Not the kind that draws you in. It was sharp. Mean. Casey's voice echoed down the hallway. Mom, you're a genius. There's a guy who pays for everything and asks for nothing. Just keep him happy. Julia said nothing. Just silence. I stood in the dark hallway for a long time. Maybe a minute. Maybe a year. Time warps when the last illusion dies. I didn't enter the kitchen. Didn't call out. I walked to my office, closed the door, and stared at the framed photo of us from last Christmas. Julia had made us all wear matching sweaters. Russ held his gift card like a trophy. Casey had that frozen smile look, eyes darting off camera. I was the only one smiling sincerely. I opened my laptop. That night I did not sleep. I printed receipts, stacked them neatly. Every tuition payment, every orthodontist bill, every flight confirmation, every Amazon order made from their devices. I totaled 6 months of expenses. $28,000. I left out the years before. I wanted the wound to be fresh, present. Then I logged into the airline website and canceled the family vacation I had spent 2 months organizing. Flights, hotels, car rentals, gone in minutes. Julia had picked the destination, Maui. Russ had asked for a Jeep. Casey had demanded her own room. None of them knew I'd paid up front. With the same credit card Russ laughed about. I bought a new ticket. First class. 1 seat. One way. San Diego. I had no reason for that city. I just liked the idea of oceans. Of salt. Of a breeze that didn't reek of ungrateful teenagers and Julia's lavender hand soap. I packed at 3 a.m. Quietly. Like a thief. Only this time, the thief was the one who had been robbed for 6 years. Before I left, I placed the receipts on the kitchen island. I added a note in clean, block letters. I'm not a service company. Good luck. I locked the front door behind me. I never looked back. There is a peculiar kind of silence that comes after abandonment. Not the wailing kind. Not a storm of messages or threats. Just nothing. For 3 days I heard nothing. Julia didn't call. Didn't text. Neither did Russ or Casey. The quiet was so complete, It felt like a performance. As if the entire household had conspired to show me just how replaceable I was. And maybe, for a brief second, I believed it. Until Julia's brother called. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. We'd never been close, but I'd helped him once. Covered his deductible when he tore a ligament at work. He was hesitant on the phone. Awkward, like he didn't want to say what he was about to say. Casey lost her scholarship, he muttered. Some kind of payment issue. She was supposed to start summer classes next week. I let the silence do the talking. Then came the second call, Russ of all people. He didn't even say hello. Just launched in. Can you turn the Wi-Fi back on? His voice was annoyed. Not pleading. Annoyed. It's messing with my finals prep. I didn't respond. Just hung up. Everything in the house, internet, utilities, streaming services was under my name. So I turned it all off. Not out of vengeance, but clarity. I had been footing every invisible cost for 6 years. And the moment I stepped away, the structure collapsed. They didn't see the structure. Only the floor beneath their feet. Julia finally reached out a week later. She showed up in person. I was staying at a hotel near the marina. A place with white walls and sliding glass doors that opened to crashing waves. I had told no one where I was. But she found me. She looked smaller in the doorway. Pale. Her eyes were rimmed with the kind of fatigue that doesn't come from sleepless nights but from the slow crumbling of a story you told yourself for too long. She didn't yell. Didn't beg. Just whispered. You were cruel. I motioned for her to sit. She didn't. Just stood there. Arms crossed like a child forced to apologize without meaning it. I wasn't cruel, I said. I was honest. For the first time. She looked away. Out the window. Toward the ocean she hadn't been invited to. They're just kids, Alex. I nodded. Exactly. Kids you let treat me like furniture. Like funding. Not family. I didn't know, she said. Weakly. Pathetically. You did, I replied. You just chose not to act. Because the checks still cleared. Because the lights stayed on. Because I didn't raise my voice. She stepped closer then. Reached for my hand. Please. Come home. We'll fix it. Pulled away. You want to fix it? I said. Let them start with an apology. Not to you. To me. And not the performative kind. Not the ones they give in exchange for something. Real ones. Until then. I looked down at the first-class boarding pass on the table. One way, Julia. That's not a metaphor. Later that night, I sat on the balcony and listened to the waves. I thought about Russ. How he once told his friend, we just keep him happy until the trip. I thought about Casey, who called me Uncle ATM. I thought about Julia, who said, don't escalate every time I asked for the smallest shred of respect. But mostly I thought about the man I had become. I had built that house. Not with hammers and nails, though I'd used plenty of both, but with sacrifice. With restraint. With the kind of quiet devotion no one notices until it's gone. And still, I was the outsider. The extra. The non-father. Julia's real failure wasn't in what she said. It was in what she allowed. In every moment she stood by while her children dismissed me. In every shrug. Every deflection. Every time she chose ease over justice. I had been made small in my own home. Diminished until all I had left was my wallet and my silence. Well, now they had neither. A week later, Julia texted. Not to apologize, but to say Russ had missed a car payment, the one I had set up for him as a graduation gift. The account was in my name. The car, too. I called the bank. Had it towed. No further messages came after that. I expected fury. Accusations. Pleading. But what I got was worse, nothing. Like they were recalibrating the story. Replacing me in it. Let them. You can rewrite history all you want. But the bills tell a different tale. The first thing I noticed was the stillness. Not peace, not yet, but the absence of demands. No buzzing phone. No texts asking for money. No notifications from streaming services on shared accounts. The silence stretched long and thin, like a tightrope. And I stood on it, arms out, heart hollow. For the first few days I expected the backlash. The outrage. Some frantic call from Julia or a long, tear-stained voicemail. But nothing came. Not even a passive-aggressive message disguised as concern. The silence was their move, their strategy. I could almost hear them at the kitchen table, drafting their version of events. He's just having a midlife crisis. He'll come crawling back. He's punishing us for nothing. But behind the scenes, the cracks were already spreading. It started with her brother, a man I'd once helped with rent. He called from an unfamiliar number, voice low, like he was confessing something instead of informing me. Casey lost her scholarship, he said. You were paying the housing fee, right? I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. She didn't tell anyone, until the registrar emailed. Thought it was auto-deducted. Guess it wasn't. I let him sit in the silence I had learned to master. 2 days later, Russ called me directly. He didn't say hi, didn't ask how I was. Just, the internet's down. Can you fix it? No rage, no apologies, just expectation. I hung up. That was the moment it started to shift. When they realized the machine had stopped humming. And not because of a glitch, because the man powering it had stepped away from the controls. One by one, the systems failed. The thermostat app didn't work. The Netflix account was locked. Julia's car insurance lapsed. Casey's dental follow-up got canceled. Everything I had built, quietly, invisibly, began to collapse precisely because no one had ever learned how to maintain it. They weren't living a life. They were riding one I had paid for. And now the ride was over. When Julia finally showed up at the hotel, she wore the same look I'd seen so many times before. Tired, but curated. As if sorrow had to pass inspection before being shown to the world. Her eyes were red. No makeup, but her posture was still proud. That was the trick. Even in desperation, she needed to appear composed. I don't know what to say, she whispered. I offered no seat, no embrace. Then don't say anything. She looked past me into the room, at the glass doors behind me, at the ocean, at anything but my face. This was cruel. I nodded. Cruel? No. Expensive? Yes. She blinked. Alex. I kept the house running. For 6 years. Quietly. Relentlessly. I didn't ask for love. I asked for dignity. I didn't get that. She stepped forward, voice softer. They're kids. No, I snapped. They're reflections. Of you. Of what you allowed. Russ mocked me to your face, and you laughed. Casey used me like a service. And you said, don't escalate. You built this. Her lips quivered. She tried again. Let us fix it. I took a breath. Not to calm myself, but to remind her who I was now. Someone unafraid of silence. Of separation. You can't fix something you refuse to name. A beat passed. The ocean murmured behind us. She reached out, fingertips brushing mine. A gesture of nostalgia, not repair. The ticket was one way, I said. Her hand froze mid-air. Yes, she whispered. But people can still come back. Not if they were never invited to stay. A week later, I received an email. From Casey. No subject line. Just 2 sentences. I know you hate us now, but I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't reply, because meaning doesn't matter. Actions do. She learned that too late.